Darth Vader could no longer distinguish time since the day he was consumed by the flames of Mustafar. The following years were marked by an existence suffocated by metal, pain, and silence. In his private chamber, where he could briefly remove his helmet, he saw himself in the curved, blurred reflection of the visor. Burnt skin, pulled tight by scars, a misshapen face that barely resembled the man once known as Anakin Skywalker. His eyes, once bright and dreamy, were now dull as cold ashes. There, alone, staring at what was left of himself, Vader was just an echo of the destruction he had caused. The missions the Emperor entrusted to him were brutal, but no external pain could surpass what he carried inside. In the Varosk system, he led an offensive against rebel cells hidden among red deserts, crushing their leaders with the Force before personally exterminating them with his scarlet lightsaber. On Delthoria, he destroyed an ancient library when he discovered that surviving Jedi scholars were hiding there. On Mygetha Prime, he sank entire cities with orbital bombardments to silence insurgents. But whenever he returned to the Empire's mothership, where his quarters remained sealed by layers of steel and insulation, Vader came to his senses. The darkness of the Imperial corridors was less dense than that of his own dreams. In the silence, he relived the moment he suffocated Padme. The look of fear in her eyes would not leave his mind, like a wound that would never heal. These nightmares were like invisible claws that dragged him into the depths of a guilt that even his new identity could not silence. In combat, Vader was ruthless. He used the Force with extraordinary violence, crushing skulls and walls with the same gesture. His red lightsaber cut through rows of enemies as if they were paper. But with each battle won, the loneliness grew. There was no more glory. There was no more purpose. Only voices from the past tormented him in the dark corridors of his soul. It was as if each fallen body was another brick in the wall that separated him from who he had been. Over time, the pain became intolerable. Vader began to search for ways to understand and alleviate the suffering that grew like poison inside him. On some occasions, during missions, he would stray from his troops for hours, wandering through ancient ruins or abandoned temples, as if searching for something he couldn't even name. His moments of introspection became more frequent, and in smaller battles, he seemed to act less efficiently. Some stormtroopers began to notice. Comments circulated in the corridors. The Sith Lord was changing. It was a seed of mistrust that, in the Empire, could become a death sentence. The Emperor knew. Palpatine sensed the imbalance. He summoned Vader for a private audience and, standing before the golden throne in the center of the Imperial Tower, questioned him with poisonous coldness. "You hesitate, Lord Vader. The soldiers are talking. Your blade is slower. Your fury, contained." Vader replied in a deep voice that there was nothing wrong. But Palpatine watched him silently before smiling with disdain. And then he began to speak. Not a warning, but a story. He told him again about Darth Plagueis, the Wise One, a Sith so powerful that he sought to manipulate life and death. A man who dared to feel too much and began to waver in his evil duty. Palpatine described him as weak, betrayed by being foolish enough to falter instead of dominating. "See, Lord Vader, what happens to those who wish to escape pain without surrendering to anger." Those words, spoken with the intention of warning Vader that this could be his fate if he faltered, had the opposite effect. Vader did not see himself as Palpatine expected. For the first time in years, he did not think of Plagueis' weakness, but of his quest. There was a spark of something he had never had the courage to admit since Padme's death. The desire to understand his pain, not just suffocate it. Plagueis' name echoed in his mind like a ghost. That same night, without orders or permission, he left using old coordinates forgotten in the Imperial records. He was determined to discover everything he could about the Sith who dared to defy even death. The journey took Vader to a dark system on the outer reaches of the Outer Rim. On the dead planet where electrical storms ripped through the purple sky, he found black stone ruins buried beneath the rubble of an ancient fortress. Using the Force to clear away the debris, he descended into forgotten tunnels, where the energy of the dark side still lingered like a thick fog. In a chamber forgotten by time, among fallen statues and battle scars carved into the walls, he found a sealed reliquary. Inside was a scroll, not Sith but Jedi. Plagueis had stolen it and planned to use it before he perished at the hands of Sidious. The writing was ancient and required hours of concentration. It was a primitive technique, predating the Jedi-Sith Wars, an exercise in deep meditation aimed at reconnecting with the essence of the Force. But there was something unusual. The scroll promised neither power nor a glimpse of the future, but the revelation of what one most needed to face. The raw truth, stripped of illusions. Vader, still shrouded in the darkness of the chamber, felt a tremor. The air seemed thin. Even in his armor, he knew that this knowledge was not common. With the scroll in his hands, he returned to his ship without saying a word to anyone. The Imperial officers noticed the silence, which was denser than usual, but did not dare to ask. Upon returning to the Empire's mothership, he immediately retired to his meditation chamber and sealed all the doors. There, with the ancient scroll in his hands, Vader remained motionless for hours, contemplating what he would do. The technique seemed simple, but it required something he had long since lost: inner peace. More than that, it required the courage to face everything he had buried. Darth Vader began the practice as one wields a weapon. Tense, impatient, and accustomed to control. He returned to the command of the Empire and sat in his private chamber, the scroll positioned before him like a mirror of what he feared most. The technique required stillness and vulnerability, two things that had long been buried beneath his armor of iron and hatred. At first, every attempt was a failure. The physical pain caused by the burns, the constant sound of his mechanical breathing, the turmoil of painful memories. Everything seemed like a barrier between him and introspection. Meditation required surrender, and he no longer knew what that was. Frustration soon set in. He broke objects with the Force, tore apart panels and walls around him, and sometimes went down to the Imperial training wings just to destroy combat droids as a way to vent his inner chaos, strangling anyone who dared to interrupt him. But the technique always waited for him, silent like a patient judge. The more he tried to impose control, the more he lost himself. He began to lose sleep, and with what little sleep he got came nightmares. He dreamed of Padme falling to her knees, suffocating, her eyes wide with disappointment and terror. He relived Obi-Wan's conflict on Mustafar, the smell of burning flesh, the anguish of seeing the blue sky fade away when he was defeated. He felt the blood of the innocent rebels who fell before his scarlet lightsaber on so many forgotten planets. And he saw something new, a childlike figure shrouded in light with his back to him. It was a boy, faceless, but with a familiar aura. The image repeated itself. The boy appeared amid the smoke, in ruins, walking toward him, but always disappearing before reaching him. This inexplicable apparition penetrated the hardest corners of his mind, making him tremble with something he had long avoided feeling: guilt. It was at this point that Vader realized that the nightmares were not obstacles, but part of the journey. The scroll said that the Force would reveal the necessary truth, even if it was painful. He sat down, with no weapons nearby, and allowed the visions to pass through him without resistance. He began to relive everything without struggle. The screams, the deaths, his mother's despair, the horror of betrayal. And each of these memories consumed him, but also revealed something he had never accepted: that he was responsible. Not Palpatine, not the Jedi, him. Accepting this truth hurt him more than any lightsaber. Determined to continue, even if broken, he chose a starting point: the trauma of the Tuscans. As a young man, he had massacred an entire camp of men, women, and children after discovering his mother's death. Until then, he had justified that act with anger and grief, but as he revisited it in meditation, he saw himself as a monster. He felt the emotions of those creatures, the fear they felt before they were killed, the despair of entire families. And then he cried, not with tears, his body no longer allowed that, but in silence, trembling, immersed in the feeling that there he had taken his first real step toward the dark side. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but for the first time, he stopped seeing himself as just a victim. And in that moment, he felt something new. The Force reacted, like a tide returning to the beach, A slight wave of energy ran through him. It wasn't power or anger, but something more intimate, more subtle. A warmth in the center of his chest. It wasn't a gift, but a reflection. He had let the hatred go, and with that, space was created for something else to fill the void. That feeling was enough to keep him going. Over the weeks, Vader began to revisit each trauma with less resistance. The day he betrayed Mace Windu, the moment he knelt before Palpatine, the destruction of the Jedi Temple. In each session, he allowed the pain to come, not as punishment, but as truth. And with each acceptance, he felt the Force whisper more clearly around him. The scroll did not lie. What he needed was not power, but redemption. Perhaps that was the truth behind the scroll. The true nature of the Force was revealed not in domination, but in reconciliation with who one is. Even in the midst of the empire that surrounded him, Vader began to change. There was no longer any pleasure in murder. There was no longer any thirst for revenge. But the figure of the boy in his visions did not begin to become clearer. With each session, the outline did not become sharper, nor did the environment become more defined. There was something about that boy that troubled him, a light that did not go out, even amid the chaos. Vader did not know who he was, but he felt he needed to reach him, that he needed help. It was as if everything converged on that image, as if there was an answer there that he was not yet ready to face. In the cold corridors of the Imperial Tower, the Emperor began to notice something strange about his apprentice. Vader's presence in the Force was different, more intense, but also more restrained, more focused. Palpatine, accustomed to feeling only hatred and violence flowing from his servant, now sensed a vibration that resembled what he despised in the Jedi. There was no longer the same savagery in recent missions. Vader's power had grown, but the nature of that power seemed to be changing. Intrigued, the Emperor intensified his surveillance of him, instructing his spies and informants to monitor his every move, every command, every unexplained absence. There was something hidden beneath the mask. Meanwhile, Palpatine also began to overload him. He created conflicts in remote regions, declared insurgencies on planets that were under control just to send Vader back into the field. In less than 2 months, Vader was dispatched to control rebel miners, eradicate an extinct sect, or suppress a mutiny on irrelevant planets. Missions with no real strategic importance, but which kept him away from the Imperial Tower. The Emperor wanted to stifle any deviation, to crush any curiosity that grew beyond his reach. However, what he did not know was that on each trip, Vader took advantage of the nights to retreat in silence, meditating among ruins and isolated caves, remaining steadfast in the teachings that now guided his soul. The figure of the boy in his visions had become obsessive. With each meditative session, the image of the boy appeared closer, more defined, but never clear enough for him to understand. He felt a strong, intense connection, as if that being was calling him to something he was not yet ready to understand. There were moments when Vader believed he was looking at himself, before the pain, before the lies, before the ruin. Other times, he thought he was looking at someone completely new. Doubt gnawed at him, but for the first time in years, he did not wish to eliminate what he did not understand. He wanted to discover it, and that kept him alive. Then the unexpected happened. Amidst automated scans of remote systems, one of the Imperial droids located something unusual. The images reached Palpatine, who quickly ordered a detailed analysis. Amidst dense swamps and distant lightning, a small being walked with quiet steps, its cane lightly marking the mud. The creature was green, hunched, with long ears and deep eyes. It lived for a few moments in front of the surveillance camera, as if fully aware of its presence. At one point, it stopped, turned, and looked directly at the lens, as if seeing beyond it, and then continued on its way. It did not destroy the equipment. It did not hide. It just went on its way serene. Palpatine's eyes lit up immediately. He summoned Vader and, with cruel theatricality, showed him the images. "An old ghost emerges from the shadows," he said with a cutting smile. "Yoda, a master who should be dead or surrendered. A mistake we can correct." With the image paused on the creature's serene face, Palpatine insisted that this would be an easy confrontation. He has no power left. He lives in exile. He is a cowering animal in the face of the storm. He is too old. Defeat him, Vader. Erase this last vestige of the Jedi Order once and for all and bring back something as proof of your success. The Emperor believed he was offering his servant a bloody gift, and he expected to see him thirsty. But inside Vader, another feeling surfaced. When he saw that creature, he felt no thirst for blood. He felt hope. He knew that Yoda was more than a defeated master. He was pure wisdom. He was the chance to seek something that his scrolls could never offer him alone. It was the link to everything he had lost. He accepted the mission without hesitation, but not for the reasons Palpatine imagined. Inside, Vader was planning something different. Not an attack, but a request. A cry. A last effort to understand what was becoming more urgent with each new vision. He prepared his personal ship without taking any troops. Not even his closest officers were informed of the route. He simply left cold orders not to be disturbed during the mission. The coordinates of the swamp system were already entered. Dagobah, a planet that, until then, had never aroused any strategic interest for the Empire. The journey was silent, shrouded in an almost liturgical atmosphere. During the journey, Vader remained in deep meditation, as if preparing his spirit for what was to come. He knew he would not be welcomed with flowers, but it didn't matter. For the first time, he wanted to be judged, and perhaps understood. Passing through dense nebulae, the black ship broke through the humid and unstable atmosphere of that planet. Lightning snaked between green clouds. Visibility was almost zero, but Vader could feel it. The presence of the Force there was thick, alive. He guided the ship to a clearing near what appeared to be a rock formation covered in vines. The swamp stretched in all directions, muffled and silent. As he descended the ramp of the ship, his feet sank into the thick mud, and he stood still for a moment, just feeling. The humidity of the forest clung to his armor. The sounds of creatures surrounded him like distant echoes. But there was something else. He was not alone. Without uttering a word, Darth Vader took the first step. Each movement caused the birds to fall silent, the trees to bow in fear. But he did not draw his lightsaber. He did not extend his hand aggressively. He stood there like someone searching. His destiny was calling him. And in the dense silence of that lost planet, the eyes of an old master slowly opened, watching from a distance the one who had once been the chosen one. Then Vader realized that now he was the one being watched. The presence that followed him was not hostile, but watchful, as silent as the forest that surrounded them. When he finally saw the moss-covered hut, the same humble structure that Luke would come to know years in the future, he stopped in front of it and looked around. Huge trees stretched out like crooked arms, and vines hung like veils over forgotten truths. Silently, Vader drew his red lightsaber, raised it for a moment, and then threw it to the ground, letting it sink into the mud. In an even more unexpected gesture, his heavy hands reached for his helmet. With effort, he released the breathing valves and removed the mask that gave him identity and sustenance. Beneath it, pale, deformed skin was revealed, marked by scars and time. He exposed himself completely, not as a warrior, but as a sinner. With a hoarse, vibrant voice, he cried out to the emptiness of the swamp, "Master Yoda, I come unarmed. I come without lies. I do not wish to fight." He breathed with difficulty, but continued, "I come to ask for forgiveness and help. My visions show me a boy. I do not know who he is, but I feel that he is connected to my pain and to what I can still be. I need to understand." The silence that followed was deep, but not empty. The trees stopped whispering, and even the animals seemed to wait. Then, with the slowness of one who knows time in its fullness, the small figure of Master Yoda emerged from the bushes. His gaze was hard, suspicious, but there was no fear. He watched the unarmed, helmetless figure with attentive eyes, then approached. Vader, surprised, felt the weight of the Master's presence, stronger than in any memory. Before he could speak, Yoda raised his hand silently, feeling the force around Vader. and the pain that pulsed there. After long seconds, he nodded and said only, "Enter you must." Inside the cramped hut, the dim light illuminated faces marked by time. Yoda did not ask immediately. He waited for the visitor to speak. And Vader spoke. He told of the nightmares, the crimes, the anguish. He explained how an ancient scroll had taught him a new way of looking at himself. He revealed how he had begun to forgive himself, and how, with each forgiveness, he felt the Force flow differently, purer, more alive. Yoda listened in silence, his eyes half closed, assessing every emotion, every hesitation. At last he spoke. "Sincere you seem to be, but still, lost you are." Yoda then explained that to understand the boy in the visions, he must first let what remained of Vader die. Repentance was not enough. Rebirth was necessary. But before that, Yoda taught again, simply and profoundly. He guided Anakin through forgotten practices, reteaching him the Jedi principles he had betrayed. Together, they walked through the swamp, performing combat moves, but also long meditations. Yoda spoke little, but his gestures, his silences, his subtle corrections were like echoes of the Force. Each day, Anakin learned more about himself and what he had lost. Not just people, but ideals, purpose, balance. There was resistance. Parts of Vader still haunted him, still tried to take control during training, especially when he failed. But Yoda knew how to dispel these shadows with wisdom. One afternoon, as the storm raged outside, Yoda made him remain silent for hours, meditating in the rain, so that he would learn to listen to the nature of the Force, and not just the sound of his own pain. And there something changed. The figure of the boy returned in his visions, clearer than ever. And Vader finally understood that he had to go all the way. He had to strip himself completely of the past. It was then that Yoda took him down a path that no one had ever walked before. A path between living roots and dense mists, where time seemed twisted. They walked together, master and apprentice, through a forest pulsing with the Force. After hours of silent travel, they arrived at a deep cave, lit only by bioluminescent lichens. In the heart of that cave was a lake. The waters were black as space, but they reflected every spark of energy around them as if they were made of liquid light. There, the Force was as dense as lead and as alive as blood. Yoda knelt before the lake and touched the surface with his wrinkled hand. The waters began to move, forming perfect circles that glowed green and blue. "Strong this lake is, mirror of the soul it will be. See you will see, feel you will feel, but enter you must." Vader approached, hesitant. He could feel the call, as if the Force itself was whispering that this was the moment. Yoda, his eyes closed, raised his hands, and the waters rose around the lake like dancing columns of energy. Vader took a deep breath and, with slow steps, approached the shore and dove in. Master Yoda remained standing at the edge of the lake, eyes closed, arms raised, moving the water with the Force as if conducting an ancient melody. The surface, once dark, now glowed blue and gold, swirling in subtle spirals that converged at the center. Then, slowly, Anakin's body emerged from the depths. He breathed lightly, his eyes open, surprised by what he felt. There had been a true metamorphosis. Those waters and Yoda's power had helped heal the blackened, burned skin from Mustafar. His hands were free of burns. His chest moved without mechanical assistance. When he stood up completely, he felt the air touch his skin, and for the first time in years it didn't hurt. The regeneration was not only physical, it was confirmation that he had returned. He looked at his hands, touched his face, his arms, his shoulders. Every scar had disappeared. His hair, short and damp, hung over his forehead. The chronic pain that had accompanied him since Mustafar had ceased. He fell to his knees, amazed, and laughed. A light, restrained laugh of relief. He touched the water one last time before standing up and running to Yoda, who watched silently. The embrace came unexpectedly, but the master did not pull away. Anakin showed the warmth of a man reborn. "Thank you, Master," Anakin said, his voice clear, free of distortion, "for everything." As they walked back through the forest, Anakin looked around with new eyes. Every root, every leaf, every sound had meaning. And it was during this walk that Yoda broke the silence. "The boy in your visions. Now I can tell you." Anakin stopped, listening intently. The master looked at him with tenderness and gravity. "Lies, the Chancellor told. On Mustafar, Padme did not die by your hands. Wounded she was, yes. Before she left, 2 children were born." Anakin stopped, his heart racing. "A son you had. Alive he is. Raised on Tatooine he was." Anakin brought his hands to his face, stunned. The pain he had felt for all those years now turned into something else. Hope. But Yoda did not stop there. "Not just one, no," he added. "Twins were born. Taken to Alderaan, the girl was." The name echoed in his mind. 2 children. 2 legacies he didn't even know existed. His legs buckled, but he steadied himself. With eyes filled with emotion, Anakin understood that he had a new mission before him. No longer to destroy, but to protect. It was time to act. It was time to fix everything. He made his decision. He would return to Palpatine. He had to end the past once and for all. The Empire could not continue. Not if his children had any chance of a future. He donned Vader's armor one last time. He could feel its weight clearly now, but it was necessary. He carried his helmet in his arm and walked to the ship, alongside Yoda in the middle of that swamp. "The last thing I need to do," he said, and the master nodded. Before boarding, Yoda handed him something. A green lightsaber, his own lightsaber. "Take it, you must. The Force is with you." Anakin received it gratefully. "Thank you, Master." Upon arriving at the Imperial Tower, Anakin, still wearing Vader's armor, requested an audience with the Emperor, claiming that he had completed his mission. Palpatine, anxious, received him in the dark hall. "So, old Yoda has fallen?" he asked. Speechless, Anakin, dressed in Vader's costume, simply handed him the Master's green lightsaber. The smile that appeared on Palpatine's face was broad and poisonous. "Wonderful. Now nothing can stop the Empire. Nothing can stop me." He stood up and began to speak like a madman, proclaiming the eternal supremacy of the Sith, gesturing into the void as if speaking to the universe itself. It was then that Vader's red lightsaber lit up, behind the Emperor's back. The blade pierced his chest with precision. The scream was muffled. Palpatine turned his face, surprised, staring at the assassin. "Lord Vader, what does this mean?" But as he turned his gaze, he saw something he did not expect. The face of Anakin Skywalker, young, determined, without his mask, without pain. The Sith's last look was one of confusion and fear. Anakin deactivated his lightsaber. Palpatine fell lifeless, and in that instant, the darkness of the Imperial throne lost its source. The reborn did not stop. In the weeks that followed, Anakin hunted down high-ranking members of the Empire, dismantled bases, freed prisoners. He opened routes for the rebellion, established contact with former senators, and delivered secret information. He did not identify himself as a Jedi, nor as Vader. He was just a man correcting mistakes, and his silent presence began to spread like a legend. Hope lit up in the eyes of the oppressed peoples. Entire systems began to revolt. It was as if a new light had appeared among the stars. Then, with the end of the darkest shadow, Anakin left. He traveled to Tatooine, alone. He crossed the deserts with light steps, not as a slave, but as someone at peace. Upon arriving at the Lars property, he stopped at a distance and watched. A child ran among the robots, playing, laughing. Anakin smiled, his eyes moist. The boy was strong, cheerful, and curious. He took a step forward. The boy stopped, watched him from afar, and noticed the lightsaber strapped to his belt. He approached a little closer and asked, with a sparkle in his eyes, "Are you a Jedi?" And there, at that moment, Anakin heard the same question he had once asked the Jedi who had saved him on Tatooine. The story was finally complete.